Going to be talking about different types of infections that mimic multiple sclerosis. If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha, and I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. And this is a very important topic because there's a lot of connection between various infections, the symptoms they cause, how they affect us, and the disease of multiple sclerosis, but also other diseases. The topic for today is very important because if you have a lot of neurological symptoms, maybe you haven't been diagnosed yet, or maybe you have been dealing with multiple sclerosis for years, when we're trying to get a diagnosis, it can take years to get a diagnosis, and many of us suffer. But then when we get the diagnosis, I mean, it's nice to know that there's a name to what we're dealing with, but we realize very quickly that there is no cure and they don't know what causes multiple sclerosis. So I was diagnosed with MS over 30 years ago, over 35 years ago, actually, and nothing has really changed a whole lot. So we don't have one test for multiple sclerosis. So what is so fascinating, so today we're going to talk about different infections that would give a lot of very common symptoms to MS, but we're also going to and this really correlates to the cause, right? Because we don't know what causes MS. And so when the doctors are trying to give us a diagnosis, they have to rule out a whole bunch of different types of infections and other different diseases before they give us the diagnosis. But when we start to look at how many things mimic multiple sclerosis, whether it's diseases that mimic multiple sclerosis, or whether it's the diseases, or whether it is actually infections that they know of that mimic multiple sclerosis, it makes us start to really wonder, I wonder if multiple sclerosis could be an infectious disease, because a lot of these symptoms are incredibly similar to MS, but not just MS, but other diseases. So getting a diagnosis is challenging for people. For most people, it's not an immediate diagnosis for multiple sclerosis. So one of my amazing Wellness Champion students sent me an article, and I wanted to I just got it yesterday from the student, and I wanted to share just a little paragraph from that article because it really shows you how crazy things are, we're not using common sense, not logic. Anyhow, this article is called Ancient Skeletons, Modern Diseases. And in the very bottom, and I think this is the end of the article, and I won't name the name of the professor because I want to be nice here. But anyhow, so there's a certain doctor, researcher, a multiple sclerosis expert at the University of Oxford who worked with another doctor, said that today, with less infectious disease than past centuries, a strong immune system is more likely to misfire, attacking itself. Oh, just one sec here. I just have to get rid of Skype here for a second. There we go. So what he's saying is that we've gotten rid of all of the infections, and so our immune system is so robust and it doesn't have anything better to do than to attack our own tissue. So many of us are living in an environment that is squeaky clean, this doctor also said, and the balance is no longer there. I would so disagree with that. Just because we chlorinate our water and we, try to use some hygiene in the developed countries, we still have infections, we still have bacteria, we still have protists, we still have worms. We're deworming our pets. We have produce coming in from other countries. We travel, we have people that move into our country, we eat in restaurants. So we're exposed to parasites all the time. We're exposed to infections all the time. If you have children that go to a daycare, you know that because they're always picking something up. And yes, viruses, but they're also picking up other things also. So again, when he's talking about how today, with less infectious diseases than in past centuries, a strong immune system is more likely to misfire, attacking itself. I think that's The immune system is so incredibly complex. So, just because we may not have identified the infection doesn't mean that the immune system has gone haywire. So, if you follow any of our work I've shared, and that's what we're going to talk about today to really show how ridiculous those statements are. Number one, there are still infections, all kinds of different microbes that our immune system is dealing with all the time. And number two, like there's a reason why we're not looking at infections. That's the whole key, is that we're not looking for infections because there's no money in treating infections. So I'm just going to go back to my notes here. Let's see here. So let's talk about just a few different types of infections that would cause a lot of symptoms that we would see in multiple sclerosis and other neurological diseases also. So I've shared this in my masterclass training, but there's at least 100 years of scientific research. Well, let me backtrack for a minute. For over 100 years, they've known that syphilis, which is it's a type of infection, it's a bacterial infection. And this was like over 100 years ago, they knew that if people had it chronically in their body for years and it wasn't treated, eventually it would end up in the central nervous system and it would cause neurosyphilis. And so people that had neurosyphilis many, many years ago, they would have severe headaches, they could get seizures, muscle weakness, trouble with muscle movement, so spasticity and tremors, trouble focusing, confusion, dementia, problems with memory, thinking, decision making, depression or irritability, changes in vision, blindness, hearing loss, tinnitus, loss of bladder control, which is incontinence, dizziness or vertigo, numbness, and paralysis. So those are a lot of common symptoms that we would see in somebody who has multiple sclerosis or another neurodegenerative disease. So this was known about syphilis like many, many years ago, well over 100 years ago, probably 150 years ago. And that's why over 100 years ago, also, some researchers, they really felt that, well, they kept finding this spirochete in the central nervous system of MS patients. And you can find the studies on our website, livediseasefree.com, under research. And so you'll see there that Lyme, Borrelia, which is the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, it's a spirochete, meaning that it's a bacteria that's in the shape of a corkscrew. So they kept finding these corkscrew type shaped bacteria in the central nervous system of MS patients well over 100 years ago. And so there's all these studies linking MS to this spirochete. They're finding it in the spinal fluid, and many studies. And the reason they thought that it was probably like Borrelia, because they knew what neurosyphilis would do if that bacteria, if syphilis got into the central nervous system, they knew the symptoms it would cause. So when they found a spirochete in the central nervous system of MS patients, they're like, well, is this syphilis or is this another cousin bacteria that's in the same family? And so for Lyme disease, there are so many similarities, and let's just talk about, we know that there's several infections that travel together as Lyme disease, but let's talk about Borrelia, which is the spirochete. It is the bacteria, and it's so incredibly linked with multiple sclerosis that you can actually go on the MS Society website and they'll talk about, like there's a lot of similarities between Lyme disease and multiple sclerosis. So things like weakness and blurred vision caused by optic neuritis. So these are the similarities between Borrelia, which causes Lyme disease, and multiple sclerosis. Burning, stabbing, pains, pins and needles, sensation, itching, fatigue, confusion, cognitive dysfunction. Symptoms come and go, just like relapsing, remitting. The MS Society even has said that there's a lot of similarities in MRI scans when they're trying to diagnose MS. So what they see in the MRI scans is very similar between Lyme disease and also multiple sclerosis, but also what they see with the cerebral spinal fluid when they're looking at that with multiple sclerosis. So I would assume that is the the antibodies and in the lumbar punctures. So then they say, well, the test results are similar between Lyme disease and MS. The symptoms are so similar, but they're not the same. They're different. Absolutely, they're different. Why? Because sometimes if you treat Lyme disease early enough with antibiotics, then people can have recovery or they can have improvement. Whereas with multiple sclerosis, they say that antibiotics don't help at all. But the same MS Society has they may have forgotten, or maybe they haven't looked at all the research they've done, whether it's in Canada or the United States. But the MS Society has actually funded research that showed that antibiotic therapy was helpful for MS, especially in the early stage. That's the same thing with Lyme disease. If you treat chronic Lyme with antibiotics, it's just not as much of a success. If you treat it right away, you have much more success. If it's chronic Lyme, it's just not very helpful. So it's so interesting that the spirochete, which maybe it is Borrelia, maybe it is, a different cousin to it, I don't know, but they're finding spirochetes in the MS spinal fluid. And then another infection, which Dr. Alan McDonald gets all the credit for this, for finding these small roundworms in the central nervous system, in the spinal fluid of every MS subject that he tested. And so he found them in clusters and mating. I've done videos I'm going to make a blog post on this. Well, I'll have links to all the different blog posts we've done. We've done one on MS and Lyme disease. We've done the neurosyphilis is in my masterclass, just comparing the research. And then the cerebrospinal nematoidiasis, finding the nematode roundworms in the spinal fluid of every MS subject that was tested by Dr. Alan McDonald. And veterinarians have known that when these roundworms are in the spinal fluid or in the central nervous system of domestic animals, which we have in our life, many of us have dogs and cats and possibly horses or sheep, etc., they have debilitating fatigue, they have numbness, they get weakness in their limbs. So these are animals that have the same roundworms in their central nervous system that Dr. Alan McDonald found in MS patients. They have poor balance, spasticity, drop foot, paralysis, blindness, weakness in their limbs. So shocking, like all these symptoms I'm sharing with you, they're very common in MS, and they're also common in other neurological diseases possibly like ALS, PLS, Parkinson's, etc. We also talked about neurocysticercosis. So when the tapeworm larvae get into the central nervous system, which Dr. Alan McDonald found in MS patients, in every MS patient, they can have symptoms of headaches, dizziness, poor balance, poor coordination, difficulty walking and falling, nerve pain in the spine or the limbs, muscle weakness, muscle twitching and spasms, muscle paralysis, seizures, changes in thinking or behaviors, confusion, loss of consciousness, even for a moment, tinnitus again, hearing loss, involuntary, rapid, repetitive movement of the eyes. And also there's another one, I don't know if it's the same as this one, but diplopia, but basically where it's really impacting the movement of your eyes. Trigeminal neuralgia is another one, and a lot of pain, impaired cognitive function, loss of taste or smell. So those are all symptoms of when the tapeworm larvae end up in the central nervous system of people, and a lot of those symptoms are similar to MS. Then there is also back in the 1920s and 30s, I guess there was an outbreak of malaria in the United States. I didn't know this until I was researching it. And so they gave a lot of people malaria drugs. And they found that when they gave MS patients malaria drugs, it really helped them. And so then there were, and this is all in my masterclass training, but there were researchers back in, I think, 1899 that really believed that MS was caused by a malaria, they're called protists. They're a single-celled parasite. And there's malaria, there's babesia. They're finding babesia in MS patients also. These protists, they're not bacteria. They're a little bit more complex structure, but they're single-celled, and they actually like to infect our red blood cells. But so the malaria itself, so these are not all the symptoms, these are just what I quickly grabbed. So headaches, muscle pains, muscle spasms, severe shaking, confusion, fatigue, stiffness, numbness, tingling, seizures. So that's malaria. And remember that the MS, uh, the MS patients responded quite well to the malaria drugs when there was a malaria outbreak many years ago. And then since then, there has been reports of babesia in MS patients, and babesia symptoms, again, that's the other protist that infects red blood cells. So they're related, just like we talked about Lyme disease and we talked about Lyme disease and syphilis, how related they are, and babesia and malaria are very similar microbes. So for babesia, the symptoms can include headaches, confusion, delirium, impaired consciousness, gait disorder, vision impairment, and language deficit, nerve pain, weakness, tremors, seizures. So, again, lots of neurological symptoms in it. I think a lot of it has to do with if these different infections end up in the central nervous system. So, I've shared with you how we've talked about how there is this gut brain axis. There's a highway of nerves between the gut and the brain, and whatever is happening in the gut can definitely cause symptoms in the brain. But we also know that we can have certain bacteria and other microbes that cause leaky gut and leaky brain, where more of these parasites are going to end up in the brain. We know that the central nervous system is not a sterile environment. We know that there are different types of parasites that get in there. I've showed you slides of Borrelia, which is the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, in the myelin sheath of nerve cells in Alzheimer's patients. But we know that Borrelia does get into the central nervous system of MS patients too, in the spinal fluid. So we know that the Borrelia bacteria is in the central nervous system of MS. We know that Borrelia is able to penetrate into the myelin sheath. So, is our immune system attacking our nerve cells for no reason? Or is it that there are various infections close to or in the myelin? A lot of these different infections cause and we didn't even talk about mycoplasma. There's so many others here. They do talk about different viruses. Brucellosis is, I think, a bacteria that causes brucellosis. That's also another common infection that they have to rule out. There's some different hepatitis C, HIV infection. Mycoplasma, from what I looked at, can cause demyelination also. Cat scratch disease, which is Bartonella, that is also one of the Lyme infections. And rickettsia also. So sometimes even the bigger worms that we haven't even talked about, they can carry some of these smaller, like Borrelia and rickettsia and others. So some researchers have found Bartonella patients, so patients that have Bartonella, and that's one of the infections that you would get from cats more so, biting insects also, but they call it, I think that's one, cat scratch disease or cat scratch fever, cat scratch disease. So Bartonella patients have severe damage to tissue and nerve cells, and especially because a full literature review shows that immunity is lowered by Bartonella. So, and that's not just Bartonella. There's other microbes that all, if they become too populated, and they all have ways to cause immune dysfunction, immune suppression, because they want to live inside of us, and that's why our immune system isn't getting rid of them. So there is a whole host, and like I said, I'm going to elaborate more on this talk in the future. But I've given you so much evidence. We've talked about various, and we didn't even talk about fungus today, like fungal infections in the central nervous system can cause a lot of neurological symptoms also. So there's worms, there's roundworms, there's tapeworms, there's fungi, there's different types of bacteria, there's different types of protists. All of these microbes, when they're in high population in the gut, but also when they have moved into the central nervous system, they cause a lot of neurological symptoms that we would see in multiple sclerosis. So then if there's such a huge link between MS and infections, and like so many different types of infections are known to cause all the identical symptoms of MS, then why are we not studying this? Why is it that as I scour through the scientific literature for 2024, all I could find was one study of a new disease-modifying immunosuppressive drug that, and I can't remember if it's a clinical trial or if they're releasing it, but that was the only research that I can find. There are places where they are studying dysbiosis, and they're looking more at bacteria, but it's just like there's no interest, even though that's where, that's where all of the clues are. That's where all of the evidence is. We don't have evidence that our immune system is attacking itself, or that it's attacking our nerve cells for no reason. We have not ruled out infections. And so what I would say is why? Why are we not studying this? Why did it not take Dr. Alan MacDonald? It didn't take him millions of dollars to find the roundworms, to find the tapeworms in the central nervous system of MS. He did this on a very modest budget. Why can we not get to the root? Because there is no money in treating infections. These newer disease-modifying drugs, they are like cash cows. And so that is why we are not researching this. Look at the McDonald 2017 criteria. You guys can find that online. You can actually find, I've done blog posts on it, and you can read on the last 2 pages who's funding. So the 2017 McDonald criteria, that is a panel of experts, so that would be probably neurologists, researchers around the world. They decide how we test for and how we diagnose and how we treat multiple sclerosis. So we have a standard of care around the world, and this is how we do it, and the doctors are not allowed to step out of line. The neurologists have to follow standard of care. And then when you look on the last 2 pages of who funds this, it's all the pharmaceutical companies that have made the disease-modifying drugs. They fund, and to me that is a conflict of interest. They are influencing how these researchers are deciding on how we diagnose and how we treat multiple sclerosis. And that panel, they feel there is no value in looking at infections to be the cause of multiple sclerosis. But there is going to come a point in time where they cannot stop this anymore, where they are like, there's too much evidence, too many people's eyes have been wide open, too many people have recovered. We have people that have joined our Live Disease-Free plan almost 10 years ago, and they're still MS-free, not in remission. They're MS-free. They haven't been using medications. They haven't been seeing their neurologist. They just get on with their life. It's like treating infections. And yes, it takes work. And yes, we don't know every single infection. And we haven't even talked about toxoplasmosis. There are many different parasites that can, when they get to be a certain population inside of you, that they can cause demyelination of nerves, right? If they're in your central nervous system and if they're damaging your nerve in any way, then your immune system is going to go after them. There's a war happening right by your nerve cells, and you're going to have inflammation. There can be damage. But it is not your immune system just going after your nerves, because it has nothing better to do, like that article. And I apologize for being late. I had technical issues. I got locked out of everything today. But if you joined late, I shared this little short paragraph, and the title from this little article, Ancient Skeletons and Modern, or Ancient Skeletons, Modern Diseases. And these professors, I would assume, and I won't say their names because I don't want to trash them, but basically a multiple sclerosis expert at the University of Oxford who worked with another doctor said that today, with less infectious disease than past centuries, how do they know that? I don't know. A strong immune system is more likely to misfire, attacking itself. That is to me, it's a completely ignorant statement. We still have bacteria, fungi, protists, and worms all around us in the environment. Yes, maybe we definitely treat our water. Maybe we've learned to cook, make sure we cook foods to make sure, like meat, for example, we're not eating raw meat. And maybe they are deworming animals a little bit in livestock. but we're still exposed to parasites. Our animals are exposed to parasites. Parasites are part of life, and we still have infectious disease around us. So then they also shared the last sentence, many of us are living in an environment that is squeaky clean. Yeah, right. Tell a parent that who has children in daycare. The balance is no longer there, they say. So this misconception that parasites are not an issue, infections are not an issue, it's just your stupid immune system attacking itself for no reason. This is why we're stuck. We're stuck in this horrible, horrible place where people are suffering terribly. People share with me every day, I'm not living my life. And they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on their health, $100,000 to $300,000 on their health. Maybe they're doing stem cell treatments or taking these expensive drugs. They're working with different. Some of it's covered, right? If we go to the hospital and we're getting MRIs and seeing neurologists, usually that's covered. But please also be aware with the MRIs that the dye, the phase contrast dye that they're using, it is building up. The research is showing is that it's building up in brains, that it is not flushing out of the body like it's supposed to. And if that happens, it's a heavy metal. It's a very toxic heavy metal. And some people are getting severe neurological symptoms from that alone. So please research that and you can decide if you want to have that dye with your MRI or not. So I'm going to see if there's any questions. And I apologize for being late. I'm sure that some people thought I wasn't going to be on anymore, but I thought I would still come on because I finally got through. So, oh, sorry, James, you did a friend request. I did not see that. We will look for sure. And George, hello. Hi, Jessica, listening from Alberta. It's so neat that we can reach Florida. Robert, Pete, listening from San Jose, California. Any questions you guys have for me about these parasites? Like, isn't it quite amazing that and I just gave you maybe 5 different types of microbes that have been known for many, many years to, like, even with those little roundworms in the central nervous system of domestic animals, that's been known for over 100 years that they cause all the MS symptoms. And then with syphilis, with neurosyphilis, with even with the spirochete, whether it's Lyme or it could be a different species or a different cousin of Lyme. Same thing with the malaria, babesia, protus. This is all research that's not new. This is like over 100 years. And why did the ball get dropped? Why did they stop researching it when they were finding, like, even it was reported in Time magazine in 1957, this bacteriologist found these little spirochetes in this central nervous system or the spinal fluid of MS patients. And she said, I bet you this is part of the cause of MS. And then it's been crickets since then, right? It's just awful. Hi, Gary. Thank you, Chase, for your kind words. It means a lot to me. It's so frustrating. I can't, before I would say maybe about 5 years ago or maybe around 2016, when I would do a live event, I would have literally hundreds of people on, and I would have like thousands. I think like some of my very old videos were like 100,000 views, but this information is being censored. It's being heavily censored. So what I would ask is that if you really feel that this is helpful and if you really want to bring change, that you start talking about parasites with different groups, with different MS groups, and you start sharing our work, the links to our website. And just be aware that, like, I may still be on Facebook and YouTube, but I do have a Rumble channel too, so make sure to check out our videos there. But on our website, we take the Rumble video that is a little bit shorter than this one, and we make posts, blog posts. So that's where all my notes are. You can get links to the research, so you can just scan things if you only have a couple of minutes. You can watch my videos. But this is where you can share with other people and you can get the conversations, because if there's 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 of you that are sharing links, that are talking about it, it is going to snowball. Like, we have students that graduated, 8 to 9 years ago, getting almost on 10 years. We're going to have a big celebration when we have our 10th anniversary. But now they're writing books and they're starting podcasts and they're starting wellness clinics. So they're really starting to multiply. We need to have an exponential, getting this information out. We need to somehow encourage researchers to study this, like to follow up on Dr. Alan McDonald's work. Like, are other researchers able to duplicate his work? That will add a lot more credibility to Dr. Alan McDonald's work. So can other researchers find these small roundworms? Can they find tapeworms? Can they find the spirochetes? Can they find spirochetes in the myelin sheath, right? And so it's not going to come from the MS Society because they're really heavily funding the disease modifying drugs. It has to come from other people. And with everything that we're doing, I can't handle that by myself, but putting it out there, I just really hope that maybe somehow we can start a different, like, not for profit, that, and somebody else can start that or whatever, but we need to be able to fund researchers so they can actually just do simple studies, not expensive studies, but simple. Like, even, can we find these roundworms in the blood? Like, we had one student from Europe, and she could find, she had MS and her colleague had MS, and they could just do a finger prick. She was a med student. They could just do finger pricks and they could find these little roundworms in their blood. Very easy to find. And then she talked to Dr. Alan McDonald, apparently, and asked him if he could check in the spinal fluid for these worms, and he found them there also. So it doesn't have to cost millions and millions of dollars, because we're not needing to, we're not about making a ton of money. It's about helping people to treat these infections as soon as they start getting neurological symptoms, as soon as, or even like when you're seeing your general practitioner and you're saying, yeah, I'm getting this really odd little tingle, even before the big first MS attack, I'm having, like a lot of us get a little tingle. We bend our neck and we get a tingle, and we talk to our doctor, and our doctor's trained. He goes, oh, we better check you for parasites. That's a symptom of parasites. And if we could do that, our healthcare systems would be sustainable. We would never, ever end up suffering like this. Like, it would be a whole different world. It would be a completely different world. So right now, our healthcare system has been hijacked. It's really unfortunate, but that's the way that it is. So, Meredith, hello, you're very welcome. Awesome. Yes, and my diet is listed on our website, Live Disease Free, under research. So please start following the Live Disease Free diet. You don't have to wait until starting to feel better. You can start to implement getting your carbs down really low. So the Live Disease Free diet, it's not the same thing as paleo, because it's lower carb than paleo. It is a little higher carb than keto, but we're not having dairy. Dairy does not work with parasites. So if you follow that diet and you use a chronometer and you get your carbs down really low, it's life-changing. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this works, right? And so, but you still need to treat the parasites, because if you don't treat them, these infections that I've been talking about, if you don't treat them, then you will still get attacks when you are run down, when you go through high stress, when you eat the wrong foods, if you have sugar, etc., it will flare. Hello, Julie. You're suffering with malnutrition and malabsorption. Yes, parasites cause that for sure. You have parasites and you've been fighting them for years, chronic pain patient, 12 years and 2 back surgeries, and you're so much worse than you were before. You need to look at Tracy's testimony that I have listed, and I have that on, I think it's on YouTube, Live Disease Free YouTube. She had many diseases. She was bedridden with pain. She had arthritis. She had fatty liver. She used a walker. Her legs hurt. Everything hurt. Arthritis, fibromyalgia. I think it was inflammatory bowel disease. She had racing heart. And she's a dentist, and she was on steroids and antibiotics, and she spent $27,000 on her health trying to get better. She was just totally disabled, like when she met last year and she started the Live Disease Free plan. She got her license back, or her vision even. She had diplopia, so her vision is back. She's driving. She's able to take care and babysit her grandkids for the first time, some of the, like the 4-year-old, like ever. She's swimming in the pool, cooking for them, cooking for her family. Like, it's just amazing what can happen when you do the right things. So what we have found, Julie, is that the herbs by themselves are not enough. The parasite drugs by themselves are not enough. Taking one at a time and taking suboptimal doses is not enough. We use a combination. So make sure to watch my masterclass training. I share all the steps there. It's really important to first make those parasites more quiet, support the body so you're feeling better, and then you would be energy tested. You would probably test well for 3 to 5 parasite drugs. And then we use an oxidizing agent, which I can't say the name here because it will be censored. It's an oxygen type therapy and herbs. And it's a combination of all those three that get us back to where we are. And you'll see Tracy, like she's completely different. Like they moved, she's walking, she's driving, she's fully living her life. No more pain, off her pain medication. So really important to look at the successes of our students. And then we will be posting this week another student. She's so incredibly inspirational. You got to listen to her, Amy. She also had MS for 17 years. And she's completely MS free, symptom free. And now she's just like just a wellness champion butterfly, just going around wanting to help that's what happens. You get your life back. You just want to help ease the suffering of other people. And you guys can all do that by sharing this with your doc. Some of your doctors are going to poo-poo it, and some of them will go, okay, well, I heard it once, and then they might hear it twice and 3 times or 4 times, and then eventually they're going to start to scratch their head. The good ones will, for sure. So Julie, you really need to treat the parasites, because if you don't, they literally shorten our life tremendously. And in children, they really will decrease their development, both mental, cognitive, physical, everything. So parasites, they are serious. We really need to learn how to manage them. Pete, history don't repeat, but it often rhymes. Yes, Mark Twain. Good job. Sam, how is your horse doing? My horse is really good, but I'm not spending enough time, but we're buried in snow here right now. So I'm so excited. I actually am getting back into horse riding. I don't know for how long. Maybe it's only for a short season. I don't know, but her name is Barbara. I didn't really like the name, but it's growing on me, and it's kind of like a little old lady name, but then I'm a little old lady too, so. But she's an older girl, and I hope to breed her. I'd love to have a baby horse. But I'm just really excited because I had a horse as a kid, and I've never had a horse since. And they get in your blood if you've ever had a horse. Actually, Tracy, who recovered from all those diseases, she had many horses too. And if you've had a horse, you know that they get in your blood, and it's just like, yeah. So she's getting affectionate. She's getting to know me well now. Can't wait to start riding her. Meredith, but we're in Canada, so there's lots of snow here, and luckily it's not too cold, but I don't want to get out in icy conditions. Thank you, Meredith, for sharing all that you can. You guys are champions. David, thank you so much for your hard work. Julie, I wish you would tell my FNP that. Sounds familiar. So Julie, you're losing your vision and you're in so much pain, you can't drive. Please reach out. If you don't have a doctor that will treat effectively, please reach out to us. We have a plan, a proven plan that will work for you. So make sure to check it out and have a call with me to make sure it's right fit for you. Crystal, your dad passed from multiple sclerosis complications 2 years ago. The 21st, he was only 60. I'm so sorry to hear that. His diet was not good. And yes, but the thing is that people can have diets that they think are clean. So I was talking to one gentleman today, a young guy, and he's mixing honey with garlic. And I'm like, honey is a super healthy thing, but when you have parasites, the sugar in the honey will feed the parasite. So don't have honey now. It's just like fruit. Fruit is healthy, but limit your fruit right now because it will feed the parasites. I'm so sorry. You have rheumatoid arthritis, still have strong flares with stress. That is caused by parasites also. And if you don't treat it, like what happens, especially when we go on the immunosuppressive drugs, the disease-modifying maintenance drugs for these autoimmune diseases, then we end up having other diseases in time. So the gentleman I spoke to today had multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis. So treat the parasites because they just keep populating, they keep multiplying, they keep weakening us. Then we have other parasites moving in. This is a very important part of learning how to be healthy, how to manage the microbes that live in our body. A couple more comments here. JR, and this is the brickwork, treating them. Yes, a zillion different parasites and a zillion possible places. Well, the nice thing is that, well, the bad thing is we don't have good tests, but the nice thing is that there's really only a few groups of parasites. There's roundworms, there's flatworms, there's protists, there's bacteria. And so we don't really love the antibiotics. We found that they usually will cause more harm. I'm not totally against antibiotics. If you have a raging bladder infection, you need to treat that. If you have a terrible dental infection, you need to treat that. But for treating chronic Lyme, it doesn't seem to be, we don't have a good treatment plan with antibiotics. So herbs are better there, liposomal. But yes, you're right, there are a bazillion different types of parasites. But if you look at our students, if you look at how it's changing their life and how they've gone on, it doesn't have to be a perfect figuring everything out. You don't have to wait, because in our lifetime, they're not going to figure it out. And you said that a GP won't refer you for testing. The testing, honestly, is not worth it. If you're going to do testing, it's just energy testing. You take samples of the parasite drugs to somebody like a chiropractor that does applied kinesiology, or naturopath that does some kind of muscle testing with machines or muscle testing. But the best DNA tests will pick up like 10% of the parasites that we have. So it's not going to be helpful. Crystal, you said you're on a low carb, no sugar diet. That's great. But you'll find that if you go off of the grains, GRAINS, you'll notice that you'll be even better. So going down to like 30 to 40 total grams of carbs, increasing the fats, having some animal protein with every meal, that's where people notice the biggest symptom improvements. But yes, you still have to treat them. All right, I'm going to let you guys go. Meredith, you still love horses. They're good for your health. They're good for your soul. Absolutely. Crystal, round, flat, protist. So protozoa or protist, Protist, protists and bacteria. Those are really the different types of the main categories of parasites. And so yes, some treatments will be better than others. Some will cross the blood-brain barrier. Some will treat the adult form versus the eggs and larvae. And this is what we all do in the Live Disease-Free plan. So if you are at a place where you're just learning about this and you're like, whoa, parasites, then watch some of our videos. You'll find them on Live Disease-Free Facebook channel. But our website, livediseasefree.com, our website has a blog. That blog has amazing different articles, and you can pick the topics that interest you. You can see pictures of the worms that our students are passing. We talk about a lot of really important topics there. And so when you go onto our website, you can click to watch my masterclass training that shares all the steps we take in the Live Disease-Free plan, how to recover from parasites. And if you need support, if you're like, Pam, I'm ready, I believe in this, I want to get my life back, listen to the successes, take some Kleenexes, because you'll have tears of joy when you hear their stories. But then again, if you're at that place where you're ready and you need support, then make sure to fill out the form, watch the masterclass training, book a time in my calendar. You can become a wellness champion anytime you're ready. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you next week. Take care and bye-bye for now.